with the Shift project, which is a non-profit, a think tank, working on transition towards post-carbon economy. So we have several areas of intervention: finance, education, digital, and of course transportation is a big issue because it's a big contributor to greenhouse effect. When it comes to myself, I have been working for 25 years as a transportation planner with engineering companies, working for local governments, and also I've been working for the Paris Transit Authority.
I would say you are a consultant or
and I am
expert?
Consultant. Yes, I am consultant expert in mobility, and I work on mobility for the Shift project, and especially on a project which we will be presenting in some days, the 4th of February, which is called the Guidelines for Daily Low Carbon Mobility.
We'll come back to you.
Right.
Okay. So I'm very pleased to introduce Boaz Adank from Breda in Netherlands. And welcome.
Good morning.
It's nice to see you here. You have opportunity to visit Paris again with new schedule for mobility. Maybe you notice it. And now, how did you succeed it? Because Breda is now a good example of how to change the sustainability of our cities. Just tell us.
Yeah.
You are mayor, vice mayor.
Yeah, I'm vice mayor of the city of Breda for 5 years now. And I'm responsible for economic affairs, social affairs, but also mobility. And mobility is a big issue in a city due to congestion. How do you do the transformation to different mobility styles? How do you use the bike? How do you use pedestrians in the system? But also the carbon issues. In the city of Breda, almost 20% of the carbon problem is due to mobility. So it's a big problem in the city.
Okay, I was very impressed because you said clearly that you are really taking cars out of the city. Just an example you gave me, you have been able to get rid of 3 car parks just to build new buildings, 3 buildings, Academy of Music, new town hall, and let's explain. You definitely deleted car parks, right?
Yeah. We're in a permanent discussion with the city council, but also with the inhabitants, how you do the transformation. And you have to make choices between climate adaptation and car parks, or between buildings and space on the road for pedestrians, bikes, or cars. When you see where Breda is lying, we're in the center of Europe, so we present ourselves, but we've got a large international community, and we're getting bigger and we're getting busier. So we need to make some changes in the city center, because we can't host all cars, also not electric cars. When the change is going to electric, it's good for the environment, but we haven't got enough space to fit in all those cars. So we need to make a change, not only for the environment, but also for the life quality in the city centers. So that's our difficult choices, and yes, we make those choices.
Also more than a car park is getting money. So
also, but the housing prices will increase when you've got a better life environment. So you have to choose between those things, and not only is money. When you make choices, it will cost money, but it will give you also other benefits. And now it's mostly about climate change, but it's also about how you share space with each other in a city center.
So explain us, how did you convince citizens and drivers to say, okay, and schools also, you said that most school pupils are taking bikes now, right?
That's a quite difficult thing, because a lot of inhabitants are used to use the car to get their children to school, to go to get their groceries. A lot of internal traffic is internal traffic. and we're now talking with the city council to make more use of the city bikes. Not to use the car, also not the electric car, but to use bikes. So we're trying to convince them to, when you've got something to do within 5 kilometers of your home, to use a bike instead of a car. We make different choices in what kind of roads we build, in what kind of traffic who may make way for each other. So we make a lot of different choices and educate the people in sessions like this that it's good for them.
How many people you would say have moved to transportation and to bikes instead of cars? Do you have some statistics about that, or roughly?
I think it's too less because there are a lot of congestion
still
already. So we need to change that more, but I believe it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 use car, 1/3 uses bike, and 1/3 use public transportation. But we need to change more to public transportation and to the bike.
And what about against the car parks? Where do people park their car now? Outside of the city, or did you underground, or did you just delete it?
It's different. We're building a new where you can live.
A ring.
Yeah, we build a new ring where thousands of people are going to live. And they were making a choice to not park in front of your house, but also or in a basement or outside of the living area. But in the old city center, we've got a lot of car parks, but we're now changing the street parks. You have to park inside. So every area has a different style of problems, but also a different solution. And you need to look at the problems in some areas. We've got areas who were built in 1930, 1940. They're really small. So we have to do different things than the new environments we're creating right now. And you see changes due to new knowledge.
And how do you deal with opposition? I mean, it's not popular. It's totally unpopular to be against drivers, no?
And that's the difficult life of a politician. You know that you have to make some choices that your constituents not like. But when you talk about it, when you not demanding it for right now, but educate the people that it is a change in the couple of years, and show them also what the benefits for them are, to show it, to feel it, then that's a difficult task of a politician.
And you have to prove that you are developing transportation buses, or are they tramways, or it's electric systems?
Electric buses.
It's kind of
now our buses still drive on diesel, and we're going to transform them to electric. We still have to choose what kind of energy source we're going to use. Is it hydrogen? Is it electrified gas? Is it something else?
Cable?
Or cable. There are some cities in the Netherlands who has a cable. That's not the nicest way in your city with all kind of cables through your street. So I hope it's going to be hydrogen, but hydrogen is quite expensive compared to nowadays diesel.
It is said it's not very virtuous in terms of to build, to produce. Hydrogen is not very virtuous.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's better than, of course, carbon.
Yeah.
Consumption. Yes. Now,
difficult choice.
Yes. Just to summarize, what would you say you should do to any other city who wants to move like you did? What should you sum up? What to do, what not to do? The pitfalls against the
I think
practice.
you have to do things people notice and like. We've got a project, it's called in Dutch olifantenpaadjes, and the literal translation is elephant trails. You see people choose their own routes, and we can make bicycle lanes, and we think, okay, they will go that way, but they will take a turn earlier or go over grass. We legalized those trails, and people were really excited for it. On the other hand, when we remove car parks, it's sometimes difficult to educate people why it's good for them. But when there arises a park, it takes a couple of years, but then they see its benefits for them. And so keep in conversation with your inhabitants and show them the benefits they gain from it. And that's my best tip, I think. So, and don't be afraid for your constituents, but in the end, they will like it.
Okay. Laura, what do you think of this experience compared to your guidelines, your book? Is it something, a framework you see somewhere here?
Yes, I think this is very interesting, and it's very interesting also when you speak about parking places, because the possibility to park the car is it determines very much the mode choice. If it is easy to use the car, the reason why the car is so widespread, it's because it's not just a vehicle, but it's a system made of vehicles, of infrastructure. By infrastructure, I mean parking places, road infrastructure, but also the public space. 80% of the public space in mid-density areas is dedicated to the car. Services, and also there is the imaginary. A lot of commercials, advertisement that makes it desirable to use the car. And I think that if we want to foster and if we want the people to use other means of transport, we have to think of them as a system also. Vehicles, but also infrastructure, parking and services to these alternative modes, but also make it desirable to use them and create a sort of storytelling and make them desirable.
Give them desirable, yes. Yes. And you also insisted when we prepared the session on the necessity, the need to evaluate the progress.
Yes. Yes? That is very important, because if you have objectives, you need to know if what you are doing is going to bring you further towards your objectives or to bring you away. Let's say, for example, you have you want to implement low carbon mobility, and you create a service of electric scooters. You need to know if the people they take the scooters, did they take the car before, or would they have
Just
taken the car?
Just to be sure, when you say scooters, you mean a motorcycle, or you need a trottinette in French? Trottinette, because it's confusing.
Right, it can be both. But let's say if the people were using the car before, then that's very good. But if the people were walking before, that's going to bring you further from your objective. So it's very important to evaluate if the services have really done the job.
Good point. Boaz, what do you think of that? Evaluation. It helps communicate.
But I thought about you have to give something an alternative. When you remove car parks and you don't give the people an alternative, the area will not be visited anymore. So when you remove spaces for a car, you have to increase or bike lanes or public transportation. So it's a system you have to change. There are two things that are important. You have to give an alternative, but you have to educate the people what the alternative is. And you have to show them that there is an alternative, because we are used to choose a transportation form we know. You have to show them that there is another alternative what is equal in time and sometimes even cheaper than the alternative they used to use.
That's a very important point, because I think many people don't realize how much they are spending for the car. In many surveys, we notice that only 5 to 8% of the people really know precisely how much they spend for their car. So it takes some education for them also to realize that they can do it also for economic reasons.
Yes. And again, in Breda, do you think it's more to educate people about quality of life or about congestion? Because traffic is horrible and you get stuck in the circulation and the traffic, or is it a good image of
we make some system choices. On some roads, the car is, we need to use the car. because when you work in 50 kilometers away from Breda and there's no public transportation to that town, when we don't allow you to use your car, you don't have a job. So we need to choose on the right spots for a car and on the right spots for bike or pedestrians or public transportation. And we look at it as a city in a system. So we've got big roads for the car, and there the bicycles are lower in priority, but there are also bike lanes in the Netherlands where the bicyclist is the higher priority than a car.
Yeah.
So we've got...
Like in Amsterdam.
No, we were one of the first cities who had bike streets. That's a street especially for the
dedicated.
Dedicated for bikes and not for cars. A car can come there, but it's a guest in that street. Pedestrians and cars, pedestrians and bicyclists are dominating those streets.
It's nice.
It's really nice.
Again, in your guidelines, any other subjects you wanted to stress? You mentioned different city zones, also how you should think the city, the historical inner center, historical center, and the suburb. You had some elements on that too.
Yes, in the very dense areas, there has been already many policies that have been pursued, and we think it is very important to focus the mid-density areas. Where the public space is really shaped around the use of the car. And we have calculated in France these mid-density areas. I mean by that suburbs of large cities, but also city centers of middle-sized cities. They account for 11% of the territory, but for almost half of the population. And most importantly, to more than 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions. And when we focused on these areas, we really have to think the transportation together with the urban planning. This is very important because it is not possible to have a real low carbon mobility policy if at the same time you allow for shopping malls or economic activity to be implemented very far from the areas where the people live. Because at least in France, the price of the land makes so that it's much cheaper to be outside. But then it's up to the community to pay the costs in economic terms to build the infrastructure to go there, but also in social and environmental costs. So I think this link with the urban planning is very important.
Yes. To make a conclusion, Boaz,
but the urban planning is important for new areas. Our city is for 95% already built. So we need to make a change in that environment, and that makes it more complex than a new area. A new area is easy to plan. We say, okay, you can live there, but you can't own a car. You have to use public transportation. But for 95% of the area in the Netherlands, it's already been built. So that makes a difficult task for politicians like me.
A last word, Laura, to conclude our session. You would say guidelines, keep on convincing.
Yeah, I think this point also with the urban systems, even when it's already built, there are ways of trying to attract, because we notice that in mid-density areas, the services are often, especially in suburbs, there is not enough services on spot. So even when it is where it is already mid-dense, so already built, it's interesting to show the local governments that you can gain in services and in local life if you have services there, shops, doctors, and things like this. And so it's interesting to bring some density there to get local life.
Okay.
So maybe it's also a
good perspective. Thank you very much, both, for coming with us.
Thank you.
And we move to second part. Nice, can close. Merci. Merci. Thanks very much.